session. So folks from the public, if you're waiting to see us come back out, I would guess that tonight, because it's a committee meeting, we won't be coming back out into public session once we go into the confidential, but we can cross that bridge when we get there. So now it's recording, and we'll get it posted up as soon as we can if folks want to watch it later on. Okay, let me share something. So one of the things I was asked, and I'll wait and see if it's large enough when it comes up on your screen. Are you able to read that, Tom, or do I need to try to blow it up?
You might want to make it one click bigger.
All right, give me 1 second and go a little bit bigger and try like that.
Yeah, that's much better actually. Yeah.
Okay, so what this is, and if you look down at the bottom at the tabs, I did this first back in April of 2017. There was a lot of discussion about the administration structure, and I was asked to put some numbers on that, and I did so. And when we got to the bottom, I haven't changed the sheet from 2017. When we got to the end, we were showing that the difference in the configurations was about $56,000, showing that we had some areas where we saved and some areas where it cost us more. But we were moving in a certain direction with a lot of our services, trying to make them reimbursable. And that's what we've done over the last couple of years. So I'll switch to the newest one. And just for reference purposes, I did not change the health insurance amounts because I can't speculate what the folks that were here before would have done for health insurance. So I just kept it the same. And if the people that were here previously had a family plan, I use the same cost for a family plan for a current employee. And I didn't put any names on this, although the salary and benefits of every employee here is public information. People can FOIL it. You can look most of it up on See Through New York. But I just wanted to show you where we are. And I'm gonna click to the bottom quick, and I can go back up through it. So with the configuration that we're in now, when compared to the configuration that you were in 2015, 2016, we're actually saving about $67,881.23. And I'll take you through that. And certainly there has to be some assumptions in there, and I used history to get those assumptions. These are actual salaries of the administrative team you have here right now. And using health benefits, again, these are not the actual numbers. Actually, the health benefits for our current administrative group is much lower than health insurance costs for the old group because they were on a much more expensive plan and they were paying much less. And actually, you're still paying the health insurance of your former superintendent as a retirement benefit. So I took the salary that's $140,000, and can you see when I make the little box, the outline around it, the little blue?
Yeah.
Okay. So I take the $140,716 that your previous superintendent was making the year in retirement, and he was getting on average, other than 1 year where he took a freeze, he was getting 2 to 2.5%. So I took 2% per year and projected that his salary as of this year would be about the $151,973.28. I did the same with the principal. And then you were accomplishing the CSE in the old configuration by providing extra work days to your school psychologist and your elementary guidance counselor. And those folks are high cost employees. Their salaries are at their top step salaries without putting a number on it. So I can put a number on it. Just use 90,000 plus their extra days. So you were giving them extra days just to do the CSE part, and they were also getting extra days to do their normal summertime work. And I'll share this. I'll put this in the board folder so that you have it for the meeting. So that was a configuration you were using, and you can see that over here the difference. And I'll scroll over just a little bit between the old configuration. Excuse me, and the new is actually $37,000 more for those positions. But again, I need you to look at it as the whole leadership group that we worked through and some of the changes that we made. Moving down, one of the other the things that was called into question was having a CSE secretary. We did put a CSE secretary down there. Before that, you can see what a CSE secretary makes, $25,000. Before that, you had a position called registrar, and the person was making $48,809 with family benefits. And I projected that salary at 2% per year to get to 52,713. Our CSE secretary is making nowhere near that. And you were also using a sub-secretary as a per diem, and that's about what you were paying back then. And then up here, you can see what we did. We put a secretary in. That secretary has benefits. We hired on BOCES to do our data service, our CIO service, Chief Information Officer service. And after aid, it's $5,000 that it costs the district. And we still do have to do some sub-secretary work to make this whole thing jive, especially many years when it's in annual review time. Not this year because school is out, but we do have a cost that's associated there. So just in that area, there's a savings of $30,528.35. And again, I didn't change all the health insurances. I used the same numbers from the old. So actually our real cost is lower, but it would have been lower even if the old employees had stayed on in the old configuration, assuming they had negotiated to move over like our current groups did. Moving down to the building maintenance mechanic, current salary, and this is actually the salary that was approved the other night, which is the same. It's a freeze from last year, $54,820. In 15-16, you were paying the person then $62,000. I projected that out at 2% per year. That's how you get $66,960. And then I went down through the other positions that you had, and I kept them. We added the maintenance worker. That was also a topic of discussion. And I can go through them all one by one if you'd like. And the reason why there's no health insurance for this cleaner is because they were receiving their health insurance through a spouse. And so I use that same configuration in both spots for consistency purposes. But since then, that person has retired, and we did not replace that person. That was last year. We had a retirement. We did not replace that person. So we did have to use substitutes, and the amount of money for the substitute was about the same. There was also no health insurance, so I just left it there. And you can see the savings there. The difference, I'll call it, would be $7,412.60 with the new configuration. And then the shared business office, this is one that certainly is questioned, and it's great that people are watching the numbers. And Charlene, I don't think I have the right number in there for the cost for the shared business office for next year. And I'm not asking to produce it on the spot, but if you had it, I'd shove it right in there.
Let me take a look.
All right, if you don't mind, because it'll update the sheet. But this is the part about this. So here's what your previous business official was making back in 15-16, $85,293. There's no aid on that, right? There's no aid on that. I projected that forward at 2% per year. They'd be making $92,116.44. They had family health insurance. I don't know if they'd still be on a family or not, but I left it alone. We certainly don't pay any health insurance for the shared business office. We pay a large amount in, we bought in, but this is what you get back in aid. Last year, you got back 73.5% in aid.
Dan, it's 186148, I believe.
1861048.
148.
148. So I'll just update that.
That's wrong. 186148.
18614. Yeah, that's not $1 million. Sorry.
That's a good thing.
Okay.
Please don't.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
So really, you're running your business office. If you're just looking at the business official, obviously both of these configurations have also had the deputy treasurer attached. Although we've transitioned the benefits for the deputy treasurer to a less costly plan, and the proposed budget that was defeated last week, that person had retired and was only replaced as part-time. So those savings aren't in here, but neither were the costs. So we won't worry about that now. But either way, with the configuration we're doing now, your overall cost for your business official is $49,329, where in the old configuration, it was $116,292. So I just, that was one I was asked to go through, and I know that's really quick. But I wanted to give that to the board because that's what I had. It took me a little bit actually to find my document from 2017, but I wanted to make it the same document so you could compare it back and forth.
That's good information, Dan. I mean, we knew when we started the restructure after the mass exodus that happened prior to you coming. That's why we made those decisions. We saw the savings and being able to improve in some areas, even while realizing savings. So that's a good history lesson. Thank you.
Yep. So that had that one there, and the other, I've got so many windows open. The other that folks had asked about was special education. And just want to make sure I have the correct tab with no names before I'm going to stop presenting, and I'm going to come back on in a second. Make sure I've got the right one. Ready to roll? Yes, I do. There's that now window, and it's going to be this one. And is it large enough for folks to see?
I'm just talking for me, Dan. I'd appreciate a click, but maybe other folks can see it.
Good enough. Because I can see it, but it's a little screen over here. I can, and I may not be quite as, I might not have the same age you do.
Nice, yeah.
So I took, obviously, column A would have been names. Certainly not appropriate to share that information. And the other information, is okay to share as long as it's not personally identifiable. So I don't believe that it is. If the board member sees something they think is, please let me know. And I'm happy to take it off of there. And I can do so. And some of the things that I looked at when I went through this, and thanks to Mrs. Jones for putting it together for me. Actually, she was a little bit low on her estimate of number of kids. And we've got a couple of high-cost students that are moving in. And I did total this up. Sorry, I'll go down to, because that's what people want to see. The total is large. And on that, I got the private excess cost and the high excess cost. 2, 3, 2, 4. It's about $245,000. I can add that right on there.
Dan, if a student with special needs moves into our district, with our current staff, are we able to accept, or do we have the appropriate staff for that?
So when we do, we put them in there, and I need to spell the word aid right. Sorry. So let me answer it by taking through the chart, Mike. Is that fair?
That's fair, Dan. That's fair.
Yeah. So we'd have to have the appropriate.
It's just a concern I have. That's all.
Yeah, we'd have to have the appropriate program. Certainly we want kids to go to their home school. Sometimes every time when a student comes in, there has to be a transfer meeting, and I'm guessing many of you understand the process and know the process, but not everybody does. Has to be a transfer meeting. The IEP comes in, our CSE reviews it, and makes a recommendation for placement or looks at continuing the current placement. Sometimes a student comes from a program they're being very, very successful in. And we may have a program that has the same numbers attached to it, the 611 or 1212, but it's about what a student is being successful in, at least when they transfer. And then we look to try to get them back to home school as quickly as possible, as long as it's appropriate and we can meet their needs. I'm going to keep saying that. Appropriate and we can meet their needs, and the student can be successful. So that's where that is, Mike. So we have a mixture of that. Some students, we have the programs here and it fits like a glove, and some students we do not. The other is that with these classrooms, you have to be within specific grade bands. And I'm sure this makes perfect sense to people. You can't have a fifth grade 611 student in with a 12th grade 611 student. And normally the band is that 3-year band, although you can get a waiver to go a little bit beyond that, depending on the configuration of the classroom. And I don't have a ton of experience filling out those waivers, but I'm aware of the process and the ability to do so. And taking a look at these, one that kind of, and I don't know the students, and it's just a cursory look. So if I were to look at a classroom where possibly we might want to look, there's like a K1 population that, and I don't know the students. I didn't look at their exact IEPs. I can tell by looking at related services that some have a lot more than others. And I also know that a student with autism in first grade, depending on the severity, and a student with multiple disabilities in first grade could be totally different kids that need 2 totally different programs. But at the very least, it kind of puts my antenna up. I know, obviously, Ella, you were a superintendent and building administrator for a long time. Chris, you're a special ed teacher. Not to put anybody else out there, but you guys would have the most experience working inside the system. And, just because it looks like the same numbers on paper doesn't mean it's the same classroom for a kid. So the biggest part that struck me, in addition to saying, well, we could look at a couple of these, were these related services. And this is kind of where I go when Ella, because Ella asks me often, and James asks me often, hey, what about these programs? Are any of these that we can pull back? We do look at that. Some of these things, like skilled nursing, and I realize that I picked an easy one to say we don't necessarily have that here and to the level we would need to provide the appropriate program, nor would be able to afford it, as well as pushing somebody out to a program outside our building. But right now, our counselors and our speech providers, they run full schedules. And so if you bring classrooms back, and I'm sure it makes sense, you've got to provide these related services at the appropriate level. So you've got those associated costs. So the mathematics isn't as easy as saying, well, we need a teacher and an aide, and a step 1 teacher is $45,000, and a first year aide is, I'm going to say 17. I don't have that contract memorized, and that's what it costs, because there's these related services that go along with it, and they can become costly. As you folks know, you approved a contract for a group called Advanced Therapy last week at our board meeting to help us provide related services to special education students. And it's costly to do so with that provider, but it's less costly than us trying to hire an employee with benefits. So it's a balancing act, but for sure this is one we should look at. But as I've said, we can't just say, we're having financial trouble here at Fort Edward, we got to pull all these kids back. You have to have the right programs for the kids. That's the law.
Dan, can I ask you a question regarding the rights of special education students
Sure.
and parents?
And I'm not a complete expert, but certainly
No,
I
I get it. I get it. But in speaking to 2 people recently, if their child is successful in the program that they're currently in, and it was working for the child, and obviously some of these children, when they have change, it's not great for their schedule or their development. Having a special ed child myself, do they have the right to keep the child in the program that they're currently in?
So, and here's my understanding, right? And I know there's some people on there that know this more deeply than I do. So if we have an appropriate program for that child, we can say, no, they're coming back. And schools around us have done it. What a parent can do is refuse that placement, and then the placement that they're in becomes dependent placement. In other words, that's where they are until the whole thing gets sorted out, and illegally sorted out if it gets to that point. But in the end, it doesn't come down to a matter of preference or want. It comes down to meeting the student's needs. And if we can demonstrate we can meet their needs appropriately, then a home program, it's always the least restrictive. It's always the least restrictive. That's a free and appropriate public education, right? That's the words. So that's where we'd have to be. That being said, if you have a student who's a junior, or if you pick a grade level, be a parent, and we all have been there. Many of us have been there. if your kid is being successful in this 611 program that happens to be someplace where maybe it's more costly than a school district would like, and you're concerned your child's not going to be successful, that's a battle you're going to take up as a parent. And I understand that completely. Doesn't mean that a parent is completely right to take that up, but I understand why that happens. And maybe if you bring the kid back in that program, they're not successful, then where have you put that kid? Behind the 8 ball? So I'm big on free and appropriate public education and least restrictive, but I'm also, it's got to be something they're being successful in, because that's what we all want for our kids. But it's not a want, it's a need. It's not I want X, Y, and Z. It's the child needs X, Y, and Z.
Gotcha. Okay, so I appreciate your answer on that. So the other thing about this, because the public has brought this up, some folks in the public have brought it up, and as you said, Ella's always been concerned about it, and James as well. And I know this is not an answer you can give me now, and I don't know that we have the time to get the answer. And I don't even know if the answer is going to give us a substantial amount of money if we could do something like that. But knowing that it's costing us net $723 after the aid, is there anything on this list? And please, no one confuse what I'm saying, but is there low-hanging fruit on this list that we could say possibly this, and this could come back with minimal expense to the district and possible benefit to the district? Or is it much more involved in that than doing something like that?
So I would say it's a, I don't want to say much more. I want to say it's a little more involved than that, Tom, because interviews have happened, placements have been made, parents are aware of where they believe their kids are going next year now. And so if you were to say to a student who's being successful, I'm going to move up the line, a senior who's being successful at the BOCES SAAC 611 program, and they're on track to graduate, and they're in a morning welding program, and we pull them back and can't get them the welding program. There's a lot of moving parts in it, and I'm picking an easy one in the high school because that's where the majority of my experience is as an administrator. My majority of my experience from a personal standpoint is in the elementary school. But it's a little more, if I saw 3 kids on this and I knew that they were if they had very similar needs, and all we had to do is get a 0.5 counselor or do something where we paid for extra time for one of our current counselors, absolutely we would look at that. And that's where we need to live in the next year, figuring this piece out. Because if we can bring a 12, a 412 here, and we could tuition kids in from other schools. If these grades were closer together, the 7 and the 4, if they were a 3 and a 4 or a 4 and a 5, I'd say let's open that classroom, and let's tell 2 schools around us who we currently share transportation with to take all of our kids to that district placement. Hey, we're doing it in Fort Edward. And I think they probably would jump on it as long as we could ensure that we do everything we could to make the kids be successful. That's where I would want to be in some of these.
All right, and I hate to be, and someone else on the committee has anything to add, please let me know. I'm going to ask one more question. So it's almost $1 million, right? So if we wanted to pull everyone back, and we created programs and got faculty to meet these needs, what's the benefit? Would there be a monetary benefit in doing that? I mean, obviously we'd realize something, but there's cost associated with bringing those back. So rough estimate, what are we looking at if that happens?
So I'll start with physical space, right? So you have physical space to possibly run 2 of these classrooms here.
Okay.
That's what you have physical space wise. And that would be me giving up the boardroom, or us giving up the boardroom, which I've said all along, if I could rent the thing out to somebody, we'd have our board meetings out on the lawn or wherever we have to have them.
Right.
Or the library, we could do it someplace, You have the room I'm sitting in, and this is a smaller room, so this doesn't meet the size configuration for a lot of classrooms. And that's why New Meadow can't lease this room from us. And you have, there's one classroom over in the elementary school that's a normal size, large size classroom that could be used for a special education classroom. That's vacant because we did not replace a special education teacher that retired last year. So that
one of the first challenges is actually finding space.
Yeah, so you've got space. We could do a classroom here if we could get the appropriate staff, and we've got good staff here. And if not, we could, if we needed another person, we could look for another person. It would be about making sure that we don't have, a $90,000 teacher, and they don't all make that. I'm talking about top step with benefits. I'm talking about step with benefits and all that. Mm-hmm. And then you have a $50,000 teaching assistant and or aide or both, depending on the IEP of the child and the configuration of that classroom. And then we only have 2 kids in it. Did you really make up any grounds? Maybe not, because now you're not going to get the aid unless that student is over the threshold for the excess cost aid. That's a whole nother mathematical equation that I have some understanding of, but it would take me some time to figure out the mathematics of how that works for each one of our specific students.
Okay, so it looks like there might be some things we can do. Certainly, I don't think that we can do them in time for this year, based on the fact that A, these folks have been told where their children are going, and B, it's a very involved process to make this the right choice. If we have to hire more people, that's another thing. And also then, of course, do the configuration in the school. So from my part, I think it's something that we would look at early for next year, if there's something we can do. But I don't think that I would make a recommendation as a committee member to the full board that we look into this as a solution, financial solution for this year. But I need to hear from some other members of the committee, please.
Well, I'm with Dan. We've spoken about this in the past. In my previous employment, that's what we looked at. We tried to find people with familiar settings. See if there's a possibility we could bring them back with the thought in the background that we're going to bring them back, run our program, and then put the feelers out to everyone else to see if they would consider joining our program. They could save money on that. We get the tuition. That's how we win. This is the first I've seen this layout. So again, like Dan had said, you have to look and see if there's similarities, if there's programs students you can lump together. 7-4 is kind of tough, but like you said, that's a guideline. But that's I think is our best option. Looking at the sheet that's in front of me, seeing what we possibly can do, and see what other schools are looking at, and see how their special ed programs are set up, and if they're thinking of the same thing.
If we could, I think, and I won't keep butting him. I think I'm trying to think of the one. If we could run a 4-1-2 here, we could. I think that's the one we could probably fill. There's a couple of these we could fill pretty quickly from surrounding schools. I just want to put a plug out there for what Karen was able to bring in from Whitehall this year, because we've got a few tuition students coming to our middle school life skills class from another school district, and that's one of the programs we looked at last year and the year before, saying if we can't fill it, we're going to close it, because it was costing us way too much to have 2 students in there, one of which had very poor attendance, so it was very costly. And she went out and talked with the chairs, and I believe it's at least 2. I think it's 3 tuition students in there. And sorry, the other district is picking up one of those 3. Thanks, Ann. 3 students in there, and the school district that's sending them, they're picking up one of the real high cost related services, so that we're not having to back charge them on that. They had a person in place that the student was comfortable with, the parents were comfortable with, it's like medical and nursing type services. I can't remember exactly what it is. So we try to work with schools. If they want to use their people, that's great, because they had that relationship with the kid. And I want to thank Ann too. Not that I want to, I shouldn't be naming names, but I want to thank the teacher here at Fort Edward for making those kids feel comfortable, because I think that's been very successful this year. but there was much hesitation last spring and summer, and for staff members and for students and for the parents. But it's, to my knowledge, it's gone really well, and it's a win-win. A win for the kids, it's a win for our district, and it's a win for the other district. So if we can do it, that's the way to save. That's our list. We got a few more that have transferred in that aren't on our list yet. We'll see where they land. So it's very difficult to say we're going to cut anything out of special education, because there's always the unknown, and we don't have any reserve for special education.
Right.
A student could move in, and that number at the bottom could go up by $120,000.
We had that, right? I think it was last year or the year before. We had $200,000.
We've been lucky enough to have that, and I never begrudge the children the free and appropriate education. We've had that situation occur a couple times in the last few years.
Yeah.
So that was the second piece that I was asked for. I think those were the two big ones. I have a bunch of other windows open. Let me just quickly look and make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Finance Committee, Employment, Negotiations Committee. Yeah, so that's what I had for history. And
Dan, before you close that screen,
Yep.
there were some other people in the last meeting that we had that talked about sending students out for behavioral reasons. I know that looking at does that fall into this category? Would that be something different?
yeah, so I think so in order for the students to be sent out, they would have been they would have had to been diagnosed with disability. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We send students out, although some of those disabilities do cause behaviors that are difficult to deal with. Let me say it that way. But it isn't just because a student is difficult to deal with. They have to go through the process of being diagnosed with that disability and recognized by the Committee on Special Education before they can be placed out. And we do have our school counselors, psychologists, and teachers and administrators on that committee that make these decisions. It isn't a decision that anybody makes on their own or can make on their own. And it isn't one that you can overturn as a board or I can overturn as a superintendent. And I'm always very clear about that with parents that, I understand what you want, or I understand what your concern is. I cannot make that decision for that group. By law, it is that group. So you have to go to that group. I'm happy to talk with people, and I've done it, probably better than a dozen times in 4 years with some parents just looking for some help on the process or specific concerns that maybe they've had for a while that they had not brought forward or had brought forward and wanted to bring forward again to my attention. And I direct them back to that committee, and I do, share the information that's provided to me with Mrs. Jones or specific counselors or people on the committee so that they have that information. But I tell the parent, you have to provide the information. It can't look like or can't be that I am trying to make a decision that usurps the power of that committee.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. So I'm going to close that one down. And I think that was what we had. And so if there's no more on those two, I would like to start with the contingent budget. If Charlene and I could have some priorities, and as the board knows, I had a sheet of reductions that we did before to get us back to zero. So we're looking at $590,000, although I'm a little high on that we have to reduce. But we don't necessarily have to reduce all of that because we've got some savings that have occurred since we built our proposed budget. Even since the budget went down, you've realized some savings through labor agreements. And one of those was in my contract. I have that spreadsheet. I can put it up if I have to, but it was just over $13,000. I think you were going to realize the savings on what we agreed to. And it was over 80,000. I think it was around 87 based on projections that the support staff would save.
That's about $100,000, right then?
Yeah, you're right there. And if I want to be conservative, I'd say 95, right?
Okay, that's fine.
Just to be conservative, excuse me. And I spent, and again, not a great way to present things, but there's a big, thick document that I spent going through yesterday with Tony Muller from BOCES. It's our final service request form from BOCES. And I believe that I can save about comfortably 15,000 to 20,000 without affecting the programming for our students, based on my meeting with him and some reductions in monies available for staff development and monies available for IT support that we receive through BOCES by taking a little bit lower of IT service from BOCES, because they provide all of our IT service, but by going with a little bit less, so we'd still be covered 5 days a week. One thing I did not realize, and it's worth saying to the board, is that we had the DL on our list of things to possibly cut the first time around. And I'll say it out loud, big mistake on my part. I had not factored in the aid correctly, because our internet service to our building, our fiber optic line that comes in here, is included in the cost of that DL. And I had forgotten about that. So actually, we paid $68,000 for the DL, and we got $63,000 back in aid, plus our internet service for the whole place. So if we cut the DL, you're still going to have to pay the about 15 to 16,000 to bring the internet into here. And so basically, the DL is paying for itself, because we get to charge the BOCES back for our teacher's aid that's for her salary and benefits, because she's staffing that room. So we charge them back for that. So really, I think it's break even. Tony actually said, I think you're making like $5,000 off of that deal, because you're putting your salary.
You are actually making money on that. Tony told me we're making money on that.
Yeah. So I look.
The question is, Dan, can you use it for other classes? Could we use it for more opportunities for students?
We can. What we can't do is we can supplement, we cannot supplant, right? Our Teachers Association, the agreement says that at the end, and I'm paraphrasing it, but basically we can't replace coursework that they would be teaching. But certainly we're not teaching advanced microbiology, and I'm just making something up for a title. And so far, the unit has been good about us providing enrichment opportunities that we can't otherwise provide in-house. I just want to put that out there. I wanted to see, there was a couple, so the total is like 15 to 20,000 from the BOCES, but I just wanted to go through and see what, if there was another one. One of the big ones that we already took out of there in our proposed budget was the itinerant art for $57,782. And just give me one more minute. I know this is not the best way to do this, sorry, but it's a big document. Yeah. And there is a couple things that are like enrichment. So that's how we could get a little bit higher if we wanted to, but it takes things like the exploratory arts away from, we no longer would have access to those, and we have teachers that use those for us to bring some programs into our school. And the other, we're looking at how many students we have going to like TechSmart down in Malta, things like that. And that's a program that's phasing out anyways. So it'd be just like a special education program. I hate to tell a student who's going into their junior or senior year that program's gone, that you've been in since a ninth grader. I'd rather phase it out if possible. So I did not include those numbers in that $15,000 to $20,000 in savings we could realize off of our BOCES bill, our BOCES service request that was included in our proposed budget.
All right. So Dan, I think to streamline this, contingency is something we have to get a little bit detailed with as far as positions go. As far as going out with a revised budget, realizing the $100,000 between the negotiations, what does that do to change our levy if that's how we apply that money?
Yeah, so it's a direct one-to-one. unless I'm missing something late in the day here, it's a 1-to-1. So if you say, well, there's $100,000 in expenses we no longer have to provide the same programs and services just because the cost of those programs and services went down. So it's a 1-to-1. So if you have $100,000 in savings and you say, apply that all to the levy, and Charlie can jump in if you disagree, but really you apply that to the levy, your programming stays the same and it costs the community less. But the part that we just need to be clear on is that isn't money that we had that we were holding away. It's savings we realized in this process. It's just timing, right?
Understood.
We don't want people to think that, oh, you could have cut it before and you didn't. That's just not true. We have to go on what we knew.
Right. So it's basically, again, it's going out with the same structure and the same programs and all those things that we wanted to get this year. But we're able to apply $100,000 in savings to the taxpayer, essentially, which is going to turn out to be, does that go from 19 to 18? I mean, what's that look like as far as that goes?
Is it around
1% of your levy was on your forecast. 1% of your levy is equal to $30,083.43.
So that means we go down by like 3.5%. Right, Charlie? Quick math.
Yep.
So yeah, so that number goes from that 19 to, wow, okay. What are we talking? 15.5% or something like that now?
Right. Quick math in my head. Yes.
I think it's a little more palatable, and it keeps sports and all those other things that we wanted to keep in our original budget proposal intact, and it gives the taxpayer, 3.5% seems significant to me. What is everyone else's thoughts? I've been monopolizing this show tonight, so please, guys, give me some feedback.
Well, I can say we got one shot at this because we do not want to go to that contingency budget. So if we're going to put something out, we got to put something out that the taxpayers are going to be able to say yes to. So we got to be careful.
Yeah.
I don't know what that number is.
And we got to 53% approval, 52.7 something, right? Approval.
Yep.
On the 19, and not that, believe me, I want this thing to not even be close. I agree 100%, James, that this is the difference between a yes and a no is gigantic for the children of Fort Edward. Gigantic.
Right. So the people that said yes know what we're about, know what we want to do for the kids, and they're voting for the kids. I think again, the folks that voted no took a look at the financial impact and voted no, or the majority may have voted no for that reason. Maybe some other folks had different reasons, but we're realizing a 3.5% savings. So we heard them. We're coming out with less of a cost to them, and still keeping the school at a level that I think people can be satisfied with. So I don't know. I think rather than changing the world, I think we go out. This is my opinion, of course. I think we go out with that savings to the taxpayer, and again, talk some more about it. Let folks know how important it is, and folks are doing it for their community kids, even those folks that might hit a little bit more on the tax. And I worry about the finances, but they're doing it for the community. I mean, maybe that message resonates a little bit more. I don't know.
Just two comments I wanted to make. If on that BOCES savings, the list you went through, I don't think it would hurt to take another 15,000 off there. It didn't seem to really affect too much. I think you sounded pretty confident that it could be easily done. And the only other comment I was going to make back on the special ed again, as I always do, I noticed there were quite a few speech language students, and I was just wondering if it's too late or if there's any possibility at looking at those, because even their related services were more just for counseling and speech. So, looking at that quickly and not seeing everything that goes behind it, it didn't look like they were real behavior students, or maybe students that we couldn't bring back. And one was, I kept losing, but one was like 53,000, and I forgot what the other one was. But unless I'm missing something that you know, it's a heavier disability than what it looks like there could be.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah.
Comment.
Makes
Hey,
sense.
so I'm not on the committee, but I wanted to kind of echo Ella's sentiment because I completely agree. I think that those are the two. I kept looking at them too, and I was like, can we look at those a little bit more? Also, Tom, I agree with you. I think that that amount of savings that we realized during our last meeting is huge, and I mean we're talking 3%. Like that's a pretty big jump.
Yeah,
Right.
I
Just
agree.
putting in my 2 cents. Not on the committee. Just putting it there.
Thank you for your 2 cents.
So, and I have a question for the board. So I've been thinking about this, and I said it multiple times at our board meeting the other night, and I think it was understood in the community and communicated to the community that the proposed budget we put out had the elimination and reduction of like 20 so positions if you added them all together, right? There was 10 eliminated and 11 reduced.
Mhm.
Did that message? Did people get that message, or do they think that budget that we proposed met no reductions in staffing? And I'm just curious what you guys know or hear or can let me know.
I don't know. I think most of the folks I talked knew that it was there were reductions still needed because we didn't bridge the $1.3 million gap that we talked about in the beginning. We only got part the way there with what we got through negotiations and what we're looking to get from the community. So I don't know. I think most of the folks that at least I've spoken to understood that we weren't able to get the 1.3, so that meant there were reductions regardless. We had to reduce some positions.
I think there's quite a few out there that think that thought the same way, but I know the ones I talked to, I tried to clear that up because there was some nebulous information going back and forth that wasn't 100% correct. So once you got those who were really concerned asked the questions that they understood completely, but I don't think we spoke to everybody.
Okay. I just curious for feedback on that. I appreciate it.
I have a fear we probably should figure into this equation here. Remember, I go back to this all the time. There's no vote in the village or town budget. The only control they have is the school budget. There's been a frustration for years. Remember, you used to be able to do 3 and keep putting it out, and people get upset because this is what we said, and then you keep sending something else. So there's also that sentiment from a lot of people, and perfectly understood. We voted it down. You're going to put it out again. So I don't know. Maybe it'll affect, maybe it won't, but there could be some that'll get discouraged just because of the fact it's going back out again, and that could change their vote. I don't think it'll be a lot, but I think it's something we got to figure in to make sure that this is, there may be a couple yeses maybe switching over that part, even though we may get some no's to switch because, like Tom said, the numbers are a little more palatable. But we can't forget about that.
I'm sorry, James. What were you referring to? I missed part of your message.
Just because we're going up we're putting this out again, and people had that result. They voted it down. It went 50% went up, but 60 didn't go, and they thought the majority spoke, and that's the way it should be. Now, as a board, putting it back out again, there may be some resentment. You can't get the hint the first time. Here you go again, and you hear that every school district. You hear it every year. I don't know. I haven't heard it yet here, but that doesn't mean it's not part of the equation. We got to figure out. We may lose some of those, and it's understandable. I get their point completely.
James,
Well,
I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment. At the same time, though, we, a couple of years ago, we did the same thing, right? And we went back out and we were able to get the majority. We were able to do this. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with that sentiment. Also, I think we should remember the difference between mailing in ballots and if we're going to be able to do an in-person vote. I think that's also so I think we have to weigh out all these options. I don't necessarily agree that people are going to say, well, the majority we're done, we're changing our votes. I don't see it that way, and I guess I don't hear it that way either in the community. So,
but
I don't think you'll get many. It'll be part of the conversation.
One big thing is we had the ability when it got voted down to cut and trim this even less. My opinion, we have zero ability to really trim this even more. So it's going to impact the students and it's going to impact the teachers if we trim this any more than it needs to be. And that is what worries me because we went through in the last 3 years and trimmed this down to barely nothing as is. So that's my 2 cents.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the other point is, if we don't go back out, we realize the nightmare.
Oh, we have to go back up.
We have to go to contingency.
And we've
So-
had,
so we don't
and
have any
wait,
choice.
and we've had a forum for community comments for their ideas multiple times. And Dan's put out a budget and this, and one year he had 3 people show up. You know, he put all that work in and time. We need, I don't know. We got to look at what we have, and we make the cuts where you need to. But it's any more cuts you make is going to impact the teachers and impact the students. And I'm not in favor of any of those.
Oh, no, I get you. I'm just saying, hopefully that's not the sentiment. But I mean, you've heard it in the past. Everybody's heard it in the past. I just hope it's not.
No, I know, I get it. There could be something, because there was some anti-positive votes as well. There were some folks who communicated that they felt like folks were campaigning for something and disregarding the other side. And so some folks kind of took that almost personally, and made sure, I think, to cast a ballot no, because they felt like they were not being heard as much as the folks who were saying, you know, I'm voting yes for this and I'm voting yes for that. Some of the other folks felt a little marginalized. I think that no one was paying attention to that 19% number. I heard that directly. No one was paying attention to the 19% number. So now that number is different. So
I also, Mike, I think to your point too, I think, yes, you know, in previous years, we have had community forums where, you know, we haven't had a lot of community support. We haven't had a lot, the community really as involved as we do now. The community is very involved and they're very invested in what's happening here. And I think that's a huge difference too. That makes a big difference to what we're doing here. So I think we have to remember that. And, you know, we've talked about how this could go either way. But I think at this point in time, we do have a lot more community involvement as well.
Oh, no,
no doubt.
and that's a good thing.
So let me,
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I'm going
to ask a question about contingent budget, right? So we had a long list of reductions, and they were all because we had to get to a certain number. So the board members are aware of those reductions. One of the big ones was athletics and extracurriculars, and there was numbers attached to that. And then, you know, you had music and the arts. Anything that's not mandated was out there, was a reduction or an elimination. Mm-hmm. So now even in a contingent budget, our services cost less, right? So out of the things that we had initially reduced, thinking we might have to go to contingency, when we were trying to cover that whole 1.3 gap, what of those things do we want to have in there? In the contingent, because if it doesn't pass, the contingent budget is the one we're living with, folks.
Well, let me ask you a question, Dan. I think I know where you're going, but let me ask you a question. So contingent, we go down to where we were before, but we have realized savings through negotiations that allow us X amount of dollars to put a few things back. Is that what you're saying?
Hold on. You know what? I just thought of something. I want to pull Charlene. Yeah, you and I are on the same page as where I was going. But Charlene, even in a contingent budget, we've got to make that debt payment.
Yes.
Which puts us over the supermajority. You know, that eats up our tax cap, just to have to make that debt payment. So really that $100,000 in savings between the superintendent's contract and the support staff contract, we've got to apply that towards paying that debt payment probably, right? We got to pay that first before we can say we're going to add back in this program or that person or program for our kids. Am I making sense, Charlene?
Well, we do have to pay the debt. I'm following you that far. And
we don't have enough money under the cap, and we don't have enough money in our old levy to make that debt payment. We don't.
the increase in the levy was not enough to cover the increase in the debt. We've said that many times.
Right.
In contingency.
Correct.
No,
In contingency.
well, right, with no tax levy increase, correct.
Right. So right.
now we can cover the debt in contingency, but probably not much more than that.
Well, maybe, because there were other savings realized as well, right? So if we look at the other savings that were realized outside of the $100,000 we spoke about this evening. That allows us to do a few things, but there are restrictions to what we can do during contingency, right? I mean, can we spend money the way we want to? Can we spend that X amount of dollars that we've realized prior to on what we want to, or are we restricted to what we could spend it on? And when I say that, I mean, can we bring back sports even though we're in a contingency budget?
Yes, athletics can be considered a contingent expense. I don't know what year they changed that, and maybe Ella or James will remember because they've been around a little bit longer. But my history lesson that was taught to me a while back, and I remember it being a high school kid, budget went down. They cut out athletics and said if you don't pass the next one, sports are gone. People came back in and they vote yes every time. And that's anecdotal on my part, but I saw it happen in my own high school a few times.
Or you put up separate propositions.
Right,
For them,
right,
each one to
right,
vote.
to get it back in. So it can be considered a contingent expense. That being said, the reason why we looked at it is because we needed to hit a big number, and we had already taken all the staff we thought we could take without, and still be able to operate mandated programming.
Right. So Dan, but now we have to come up with a contingent budget tonight based on the budget not passing for July 1 in order to pay some bills. But if it goes down, if it goes down when we do have the actual vote, do we have the ability to modify that contingency budget because we had to put it out prior to the vote?
That is a fantastic question that I don't know the answer to. I'm going to ask Charlene, and she might not know the answer either because this year is like no other year. And we're getting the guidance as it comes. Charlene, do you know the answer to that? Can we modify our contingent budget later on?
Well, a contingent budget, I mean, the dollar amount will be established, I think.
Yep.
But a contingent budget, I don't think that you'd probably have to finalize it. I mean, we're going to need legal guidance because we want to make sure, because first of all, you want to make sure that you're not spending money on things that you're not allowed to under contingent budget. And so we're going to need legal advice. And then second of all, we have to make sure that our admin is within the admin cap, because that's what happened during the tax cap era. So now you have an admin cap, and it's based on last year's admin expenses and this year's admin expenses divided by your program and capital expenses, and you have to exceed the lower of the two.
Right.
So it's a formula calculation. So I mean, you just have to abide by the dollar amount. So I'm not really sure exactly when we have to establish line by line, what it's going to be. But.
All right, so we know what that is. It's $3 million and change. So whatever we establish for July 1 and things that are allocated under that amount, we could allocate them differently after the budget vote. We just have to remain operating under $3 million and change.
We believe we can change that after if the vote fails. We believe. Let's say it that way. So
Okay, we'll find out. Okay, gotcha.
I mean, we do budget transfers all the time, but I mean, your operational expense, and in some things you just have to decide, because of your contracts, and I don't think you want to make any major changes. That would just be my advice.
Gotcha. Yeah,
I said earlier, Tom, that again, I really think that you need to spell out that contingent budget. I mean, now, and you put the two budgets, side by side. So as a taxpayer, you decide, you vote yes for the budget, or you're voting yes for this contingency budget. It's crystal clear to a voter whether you vote. I mean, so I think that before July 1st, you do set that contingency budget pretty much right up at what you're going to do. As a taxpayer, I would like that. I would need that to make my decision.
Yeah, and I think that might help people see it a little more clearly too, the contrast between the two. Okay, so but we do have to talk about some positions now because.
Let me say one more thing in public first. Okay. So I did send communications to multiple businesses since the budget failed. I sent to I sent to Irving, telling them that our budget had failed, asking, if they were able to provide any support for us. I sent to DA Collins. I sent to WCC. I asked WCC for WL Plastics contact information. And I also sent to another contact that I have who is a huge supporter of the arts in our region and across the state, actually. As of today, I have received 0 responses. Certainly, I just wanted people to know, the board to know that I did reach out, because that's what we've been doing right along. I don't know if anything will come to fruition there or not, but certainly if somebody said, geez, I'd love to sponsor your band program and here's $50,000, then that's a game changer. But I also think, and I'm going to ask this question, and Sharon, you might not know the answer either, and I know I don't. If we were to get, after the fact, a donation of $50,000 that says, this is for music, this is for band, can we adjust the budget based on that donation and go above the contingent cap on the levy?
I would say seek legal advice, but I would say no.
Okay, gotcha. Legal.
Dan, did you ask Albany on outside chance?
There's nothing. I mean, I did not, Mike, but I don't feel that that's a viable avenue right now. So,
Yeah, that well's dry.
I reached out to the others, and maybe I'll hear something. And I know that's the ask I made was a big ask, so people probably can't turn that around in 3 or 4 days. So maybe we'll hear something. I wouldn't say that we rest our hopes and dreams on that, but certainly I wanted to let you know that I did make those communications. It was email. I sent an email. But those people do email back and forth with me on occasion, so it isn't like they were cold emails. They know who I am.
Dan, before we move on to if we're going to go to executive session, what about transportation? Do you have an exact cost on that? Did Charlene look that and check that out a little bit?
Yes.
Was it $100,000 savings that we're doing based on our last budget? Because in our last budget we put out there to cut transportation.
Right. So the savings is in the people, and I know there was a comment last time that the savings was $5,000, and I had that spreadsheet on the buses that we did share one evening.
Yes. Yeah.
I might have it on one of my screens, and that number is, it was like $5,700 that we would save because of the way our buses are funded back through transportation aid. The savings that we're talking about is on the drivers themselves. As you know, we've got a longtime cleaner driver who's retiring, and the proposed budget did not replace him. We have a part-time driver that was working 36 hours a week last year. The proposed budget did not replace him. That's where the savings come from. It doesn't come from the bus leases, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I did reach out to a Leonard Bus as well as Santander. Leonard Bus actually sells us the buses. Santander is our leasing company, to let them know we had an event of non-appropriation. In other words, our budget didn't pass, and did talk to them about turning in buses, because we had that as part of our plan anyways. But now that the budget has not passed, we have more flexibility in turning in more buses. At the same time, we had the proposition pass for the 2 new smaller buses, one with a wheelchair, which we absolutely have to have a wheelchair bus. We absolutely have to have it. But the 27 passenger that we were going to get new to replace the one that's going off lease, we could cancel that one and keep the 66 passenger, one of the at least 66 passenger. The annual payment is more, but the aid flows back, and that's where that $5,000 difference or $5,700 difference comes from. I'm not saying that we could put transportation back in, but having the 66 passenger that we own, plus 20, it's 11 years old, 10 or 11 years old, with like 40 or 50,000 miles on, not a lot of miles. And it was in a spreadsheet I shared a while back, if I'm getting the miles not exactly correct. And keeping either 28 or 29, they're brand new. One is a year old and one is 2 years old. and keep paying that lease and turn in one of the big 66s and not buy the 27 passenger, then you have more flexibility to move more kids. And I asked John Brown if the 27, if a 66 could get pretty much every place that our 27 passenger used to have to go. And he said, yes, probably every place you had to go. It would take some finagling, and but we could do it. So that would probably be the recommendation I would make, is that we don't get the 27 passenger bus, even though it was approved, and we turn in one of the 66s and keep a 66. So really our fleet would be reduced by 2, be reduced by a 66 and by a 27, because that provides us the most flexibility going forward to try to do something at a later date. I'm hoping that makes some sense.
Yeah, and you're right, Dan. Probably based on that 5,000 comment from the outside was based on what you presented just on leases. Yes.
Yeah, and that was the right number. It was, again, I could show it if I had to, but it's like between 5 and 5,700 on the leases.
Yeah, 57, 5220. Yes.
You got it up there, good man.
Yeah, yep.
It's not fully realized. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Anything else that we have to talk about before we go into exec to discuss the ugly budget?
Hey, Tom, I have a question quick.
Yeah, Joe.
I'm not on the committee, but I was reading through the contingency budget information that Todd had shared and some other sources. And my question would be, if we go to contingent, does that change any of the things we've already negotiated with those pieces since we go to last year's budget numbers, or does the contract that we've negotiated supersede the contingent? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, the contract makes those expenses contingent expenses within the caps provided on the administrative portion. So let me say it a different way. So if our administrative portion can only be X number of dollars and something we negotiated makes the amount we would have to pay for our administration above that, we can't go above it. We got to cut something out of it. But if you're talking about all of our other employees, those contracts are contingent expenses now that we've agreed to them. Almost 100% of those expenses are contingent expenses now.
Good question, Joe. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
The only thing I think that we could do before we go in is if we could look at calendars. And Charlene, if I got our dates right, we got to have a budget approved by the board before July 1. So we'd have to meet on the 29th or the 30th of next week. And if we could set that meeting now while the public is here, that everybody kind of knows, we'll still post it and get it out there. But if folks can look at their calendars, me included, we should set that now, if possible. I'm hoping it's possible.
So we got Monday the 29th or Tuesday the 30th. That's pretty much.
I prefer Tuesday, but I work at the will of the board.
You're gonna do the day before, huh?
I don't work for Charlene either. Sorry, but and again, we do work at the will of the board, but she's working for 2 school districts.
Does that work
I
for you,
prefer
Charlene?
Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday works for me too.
Tuesday works for me.
I'm good with Tuesday.
Good. We can celebrate my birthday. Woohoo!
All right. Well, the virtual
Todd's
cake.
got the banner up in his background for you for your birthday.
Yeah, I saw that.
Save that banner, Todd.
Charlene, are you able to be on Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay. So Tuesday the 30th, 5:30 or 5 or midnight? What do we want to do?
5. Well, can't do midnight, right? 5:30 is the time we met today. I think it was pretty convenient for most folks. So if 5:30 works, let's do 5:30.
Is that good? Okay, I see a lot of head shaking. So that's
Works for me.
Yeah, it worked for me.
Yep, that works.
In the Dan said. Dan, do you say yes as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Charlene, do you want to be in the confidential I don't think the confidential session is going to be I don't think it's going to be very long. Charlene, can you join us? I'll send a new link. Will you join us just at least for the beginning of that? And if it gets long, we'll get you out.
Sure.
And board members, thank you, Charlene. And we'll hang this one up. I will send you another invite to your board email momentarily that just says confidential finance committee or confidential something, it'll say.
Gotcha.
The folks out there in the public, thank you for being here tonight. And you'll be able to see us again on Tuesday the 30th at 5:30. At that time, we'll have our plan would be to have a contingent budget and possibly the revote budget ready to go, although that's a lot. But I understand what Todd said and what some people echoed is that seeing them side by side is going to make a big difference for our taxpayers to see what's in and what's out. That's for certain.
Yep.
Important. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you just in a minute in a different link.